Welcome to Bears on Tap, hosted by Kyle Juice Michalski, Quentin Q Crisco, Sonny Verma, and the one and only Ron Luce. Bringing you all the news, analysis, and opinions on the charter franchise, Chicago Bears.
And welcome in to the bye-week edition of Bears on Tap. My name is Quentin Crisco, joined by Sonny Verma and Ron Luce. Gentlemen, we are here today to discuss the Chicago Bears offense, to give some hot takes on it, which we'll get to after our exercise here. But the exercise we're going through, we're going to go player by player on the offense, give each player a grade for their performance to this point in the season, and then we're going to use those to create positional grades, which we did this for the defense last week. If you didn't catch it, you can go to ontapsportsnet.com. The links to the podcast, the YouTube video are all in the article, and the article also gives you some visuals of what we did, what grades we gave. So make sure to go check that out. But gentlemen, how are you guys doing this fine bye week Sunday, starting with Ron?
Q, I'm kind of sad. There was no Bears football today. Like it felt like a piece of my fall curriculum was missing today. Like I was sitting here, I'll be brutally honest with you guys. I didn't watch a lick of football today. Not a single lick. I didn't. I followed along, of course, because I'm a sicko and I play in 10 fantasy leagues, but didn't watch a lick of football today. It feels weird. A part of me feels lost today, but otherwise I'm doing great, gentlemen. How are you guys? Sonny, how you doing, buddy?
Ron, it's so funny you say that because exact same here. I didn't watch any football today. Usually, it's the bye week and the Bears aren't playing. So it's like, okay, let me go watch what a good football team looks like. But you know what? This year, I know what a good football team looks like because my team is a good football team. So I just kind of got distracted by a couple things coming up in life. And, I just kind of relaxed a little bit. I can't wait. I was counting down the minutes for the show to start because, I want to start getting back in the mood. I'm over this bye week and I just want to talk some Chicago Bears football.
Well, congratulations on both of you for having lives. I watched Red Zone all day. It was incredible.
See, but
I did some cleaning and stuff, but it was like Red Zone was on all day long. It was great.
The all-day Red Zone is undefeated, though. Like when the Bears play on like a Monday or like a Sunday night or like a Thursday night, that week's Red Zone is undefeated because you can just watch and it's beautiful.
Absolutely.
So it's still a great Sunday if you ask me, man.
But so getting to our exercise here, I've already filled in some grades. I filled these in on Friday afternoon, so I don't even remember what I did. I might change them as we go. We'll see. But Ron and Sonny are going to be filling in their grades as well. And for those who might just be listening, we have a graphic up here on it. Make sure to go to YouTube and check this out if you'd like to see it, or it'll be an article form in the next few days. But our grading criteria, A is an all-pro starter, A- is a blue chip starter, which there's kind of some leeway on how you would choose to define that up to the grader. B+ is a key starter, a B is a plus starter, a B- is a starter, just a guy who should be starting in this league. C+, you're talking rotational player. C is quality depth. C- is a depth player who maybe has plus special teams ability. And then D+ is where he's hitting questionable depth or projects. All of D is within that realm, the questionable depth project category. And F is a guy who belongs on the practice squad. So starting this off, Sonny, let's get right into Caleb Williams. What are you thinking here?
So Caleb's interesting, right? Because I don't think any of us have any qualms about how he's played this year. He's obviously getting better and better, but he hasn't, exactly reached of course, naturally, his ceiling in the first 6 weeks of NFL football. I put him down as a B+. I think he's doing what the Bears are asking of him, and he's doing a really good job of it. And as I mentioned before, he's getting better and better. This I fully expect to be in the A's, if not by the end of next or at the end of this season, by the beginning of next year. But if I'm to judge and grade strictly on the first 6 weeks, I can't put him at A level yet, but I do like what I see and what he's doing for this team. He's doing exactly what this team needs him to do.
Ron, what are you thinking here?
I think Sonny put it perfectly. I am going to preface and just let everybody know that's listening along with us. If you want to comment your grades, highly recommend everybody to do so. You can do that from X. You can do that from YouTube. You can do that from Facebook. We have Daniel Barry Sports here saying, hey, a little bit earlier, hello to you. But we have Scott sharing his grade as well. And just like that, you guys can also share along. Scott's saying Caleb Williams is a B. I am actually going to agree with Sonny on this one. I think a B+ is a good spot for Caleb Williams through the first 6 weeks. Again, if we're just judging based on everything going on, how they've played to this point, obviously there might be a little bit of favoritism where you could maybe lean A- just because he is a quarterback and he's showing those glimpses of potentially being a franchise QB in the long term. But I think right now, the way he is, he's a key starter. Like, I think this offense doesn't look as good as it has the last few weeks without Caleb Williams. So with that being said, if we're, again, like Shetty said, if we're just grading on the first 6 weeks here, I think he's a B+, but I fully expect by season's end for him to at least be an A- when it's all said and done.
And looks like I was right spot on with you guys. B+ was the grade I gave on Friday. I'm standing by it. I agree with most of what you guys have said. I don't think the Bears have the same record right now without Caleb Williams, with someone else starting. I think that he has been that good the last few games where, maybe it doesn't go as swimmingly in one of those games as it did if you had a different quarterback at the helm. I think he's playing really high-level football right now. And really, I'm hoping by the end of the season, we're talking about him in A-, maybe even A territory, because he's really come on that strongly for them to win some division games. I think we're going to need to see that. But moving on, Sonny, I'm going to start you off again on this one. DeAndre Swift, what do you see here?
This one's a little tricky too, because obviously he had the first half of the 6 games and the back end. Overall, I'm just going to grade it right as average. So I'll just put him at, I'll put B-. And again, that's only because I think in the last 3 games, he'd be a key starter, whereas the first 3 games, he was probably the player I was most frustrated with. He's changed the dynamics of this offense. I think we're looking a lot better because we have a presence in the backfield that's kind of taking the pressure off Caleb. And I don't think it's a coincidence that Caleb's looking better now that DeAndre Swift has figured out his role on the team. But those first couple of weeks were rough for DeAndre. A lot of us were wondering and counting the pennies and just how big that contract was and what else we could have done with it. But I think he's redeemed himself over the last couple of weeks, and I'm hoping that he continues on the trajectory that he's on.
Ron, where are you sitting on it?
Yeah, and Sonny, a couple of commenters, I think, agreeing with you here. Dennis Moody saying, I think that's a B-, and then noting a rough start. And Scott as well saying B-. I think I'm going to be a little more optimistic, and I'll explain why. I'm going to give him a B. I think he's a plus starter through the first 6, and here's why. In fairness to DeAndre Swift, nobody could run the football in this offense the first 3 weeks of the season. I think there was an identity change that needed to happen with the offensive line, with the blocking schemes. Q, this is something you and I think have highlighted a lot in the O-line film room episodes that we do. I think once they started running more power football, just downhill blocking schemes for this big brawling offensive line to really tap into what they do best, I think you've seen the running game as a whole correlate with that. For players like Roschon Johnson, for the very little that we've seen of guys like Travis Homer early in the season, and even a guy like Caleb Williams, who took off and ran quite a bit in the past week in London. So I think with all of that taken into consideration, like DeAndre Swift was running with purpose. I think those first 3 weeks, I think just the blocking schemes didn't align with what the offensive line did best. So for that reason, I'm going to give him a little more of the benefit of the doubt, but I still think that B- range is still really good for him. So I'm going to give him a B.
Yeah, and I'm a little different than both you guys on this one. I gave him an A-. Ooh, different. And I know this is going to get pushed back. I knew this one was going to be more controversial. But when I'm talking about a guy who's pacing almost 1,500 yards from scrimmage on the year, I have a really hard time giving him anything but a blue chip. Like he has been such a key part of the offense. Even if it's the last 3 weeks, that's almost more impressive to me because the whole offense was broken the first 3 weeks. So if he's pacing 1,500 yards on the season and almost all of that came in the last 3 games, that's just so freaking strong to me. Like I don't, to be clear, I don't expect him to maintain A- to the end of the year. But to this point, I look at his numbers, I look at his performance. His last 3 games, he has been a real threat as a pass catcher and a runner. And he's run with good vision the last 3 weeks. I didn't like the vision the first 3 weeks. Ron, like you said, I think there was some identity stuff, some blocking concepts that were in there that really made it harder to evaluate until those last 3 games. Those last 3 games, I think he has been utterly electric. So A- is where I'm sitting with that.
Did the bye week break Q? Q for the last 4 weeks has been the roughest grader of all of us. And all of a sudden here goes optimistic Q over here. I love it.
The guy, the last 3 weeks, he's averaged what? 130 yards a game from scrimmage? Like that is top of the league type stuff.
I think it
needs
also
to be recognized.
I think it also further highlights, though, that we've all seen this with where Waldron has come from. Like when the running backs are succeeding, the offense is humming, and you're seeing it in correlation, right? It was that way in Seattle. It was that way all the way back in the day with the Rams, and now it's happening again with the Chicago Bears. Like it doesn't really matter who's back there; it's just you can see it. And Q, really quick, you mentioned the vision. I don't necessarily love Swift's vision still, personally. I think there's been a couple of runs where I go, ooh, if he's even got a half an eyeball back on the backside, he could probably break a big run. But I agree with you. I think overall, he's been really good the last 3 weeks. But I agree, Sonny. I like this optimistic Q. It's weird. I'm not used to it.
I mean, hey, like I said, I don't truly expect him to maintain this level of play to the end of the season. But all I can grade a guy is on what he's done this year, and 1,500 yards from scrimmage. That's a blue chip running back to me. That's what he's pacing right now. Now, moving on, I'll go ahead and start this one off with Roschon. Let's see what I put here. I gave Roschon a C+. So I'm right in line with Dennis Moody in the comments here. And that's rotational player. I think that's fair. Like I'm okay with Roschon as a short yardage back, a goal line back, occasionally as a passing down back. I don't think he offers you quite the juice that you really want, but he's very capable in pass pro. So that fits rotational player really clearly to me. But if he becomes your starter, I start to get worried that there's not enough juice there. But Ron, what do you think?
Everything that you just said. I think that nails it perfectly what Roschon Johnson is. I also have him as a C+. I think there was a world where he could become a starter and like an okay starter and you feel fine. I think, again, there's a reason. I know a lot of people are like, oh, he would have been the starter at Texas if it wasn't for Bijan. Well, yeah, no shit. Bijan Robinson's a generational talent. Even then, he wasn't necessarily impressive. I think that's why a lot of people didn't really look at him until the 4th round. Again, he brings an element that this backfield sorely misses, and that's the physicality, right? I think as a pass blocker, I love a good running back that can pass block. So that is always a win in my book. But he does lack a lot of the juice. And I know there's probably people out there that are under their breath going, well, David Montgomery didn't have the juice. He had more juice than Roschon Johnson does. And for that reason, I like him as a rotational player. I think there's nothing wrong with him being a rotational player. And Scott said the exact same thing with a C+ as well. I don't think there's anything wrong with that. To me, he is a really nice number 2 running back on just about any team in the league, and that's exactly the role he fits right now with the Chicago Bears.
One more comment from Scott here. Johnson and goal line with Kramer as fullback is electric. I couldn't agree more. There's a lot of punch you in the mouth attitude with that grouping. Sonny, where are you at on this one?
So I'm a little bit more optimistic, and I live in that world where Ron described, where I think there is a scenario out there where Roschon can be an average starter. So I'm putting him at a B-. I think for the role that we've given him, and you have the same description later on about a different player. He's performing that role as asked. I think that, should circumstances change, of course, we don't want anything happen to DeAndre Swift, but I think Roschon is showing what he's capable of in limited snaps. But if he all of a sudden got the ball and became starter, I really think he might be one of those players who is able to perform better when he gets more carries and really gets to show off his full game. He's not a star, but I think he's one of the better number 2s. And a guy who you could use as number 1 and, at least be league average.
I think to the point, it's something that Ron kind of mentioned there. David Montgomery didn't have the juice. David Montgomery gets behind the best O-line in football, and suddenly his physicality is a lot more important than it was behind a bad.
Profound, I believe, is the word you're looking for there, too.
Yes. profound. Like, we saw those runs that he's making right now for Detroit. They just didn't go for the same amount of yards because he had to break X amount of tackles before he could get 5 yards. Like, so that same grit just goes a lot further when you have a really good line in front of you. So I could see a case for Roschon with you give him a really good O-line. Suddenly that physicality that he runs with becomes something that's really notable.
Yeah,
Now,
and
go ahead.
really quick, there's a comment here from Ron Winarski who says, new sub here. Thank you, sir. We welcome you. Hello. But yes, he says Roschon is a third down back. I think Roschon on a team with maybe Khalil Herbert as your number one running back is your third down back at this point in the season. But I think just because of what DeAndre Swift can do in the passing game, and they noted that when they signed him, is that being an important element of why they chose DeAndre Swift over some of the other options on the free agency market. I think that just immediately, unfortunately, kind of knocks off Roschon's value as a potential third down running back. But I think if we ever got to a world where, knock on any piece of wood that you could find, because I have none around me right now, that DeAndre Swift got hurt, I think Roschon Johnson will absolutely slip into that third down running back role, no matter who's getting majority of the carries in that backfield.
Now, moving into the wide receiver room, let's start this one out with Ron. Ron, where are you sitting at for DJ Moore?
This is probably the hardest grade that I was thinking about earlier. Like, no bullshit. I was actually sitting here mulling this over in my brain, kind of like almost confused of what to do here. Because if we're going based on what he's done as a Chicago Bear, it's easy. He's at least an A-, right? I mean, he's been incredible in his short tenure as a member of the Chicago Bears. A 1,300-yard season with, not a knock on him, but with Justin Fields as your quarterback, where they didn't throw the ball a lot. He still had one of his best career seasons. He earned that $110 million deal. But I don't know what the hell happened the first couple weeks of the season with anybody in this offense. But DJ Moore looked like mentally checked out at one point. And I don't think that's necessarily a thing. And I think he's okay now. And I think all is right in the world over the course. But he didn't look like DJ Moore that we were accustomed to a season ago. Scott's got him as an A-. I think I'm going to drop him right now to a B+. And maybe that's a little controversial. But I think for what DJ Moore has been in this offense, you've clearly seen that Cole Kmet, DeAndre Swift at times are almost more important in the receiving game right now. He certainly has had his moments. That Carolina game was fantastic, and watching it in person was even better, especially when you saw the little sad Carolina fans that decided to come all the way to Chicago just to get their heart ripped out by DJ Moore. I just think I think if he goes 2 or 3 more weeks of what we've seen, recently, I will absolutely put him back up in the A- tier. But I think for now, we knock DJ Moore down to a B+ in my book.
Sonny, what do you think? And do you think that's controversial?
I don't think it's too controversial. In fact, I think it's not controversial at all because I also have him at a B+. I don't know if it's necessarily his fault, but just the way this offense has been, and Ron kind of alluded to it, we're spreading the ball around. So there's not really much space for one guy to have, all pro type of numbers. It's a good problem to have, Cole Kmet playing the way he has, Swift's emergence over the last couple weeks. But B+ might be a little inflated just because of his past history with the Bears, as Ron alluded to. But I think B+ right now is more than fair. That Carolina game was so much fun to watch, especially with the DJ Moore narrative in the background. And I'm still excited, that he is our wide receiver 1.
And I'm on par with you guys. B+. I mean, I like what Ron said there. A year ago, A-. Last season was awesome, but it's not last season anymore. And right now, he's a guy who's pacing 890 yards. Obviously, that's a bit too black and white for reality. But, I feel like there have been some minor things that we've seen in his game that make you kind of, maybe this guy's never been, in a very talented wide receiver room, and you might be starting to see this now that he's kind of used to just being the guy, and there's some learning curve here to learn how to play in a room that's got a bunch of dudes, not just a bunch of guys, so that I think there is a learning curve there. I don't want this to be a knock on DJ Moore. I'm thinking by the end of the year, we're talking about an A- player again, but if we're grading the first 6 weeks, this is the way I see the first 6 weeks having been. He's a key starter. He's important for what he does to defenses and how defenses have to think about him. But I haven't seen that blue chip guy much this year, so it's hard for me to put him in that tier. Now, do you guys? Let's go to Sonny on this one. Odunze, how you doing with him?
So Rome, this might be, speaking of controversial, I actually have Odunze as the highest graded guy on the offense for me. Spoiler alert, A- for me. And this is the reason being. If you watch his tape, the numbers look okay, right? But there's so many opportunities missed with Rome just because he's behind DJ Moore and Keenan Allen. And he happens to be the third or fourth or maybe no read when it comes to this offense. If he's the wide receiver 3 on the Bears, he's the best wide receiver 3 in the entire NFL. He might be the best wide receiver 2 in the NFL with the way he's been playing. I just think he's really skillful. I can't wait to see where his future goes. And I might be bringing him up a little bit later in this episode.
Ron, how you feeling?
I'm feeling pretty good about Rome. I don't think I'm as optimistic as Sonny is, and I think that's okay. That's a beauty of difference of opinion. I still put him as a B+ though. I think he's a key starter on this offense. I agree with everything that Sonny just had to say in terms of the depth chart. That is 100% a determining factor here on why almost Rome is a hard player to grade in this offense right now. Because there are times when you look at the all-22 and you do see him wide open. He's a great route runner. We knew that. He's a good 50-50 ball player. And I think we've kind of been robbed of that because the only times he's really had a 50-50 ball come his way, it gets picked off. Right? I mean, that's just kind of been the narrative, unfortunately, so far this season. So I don't think we've really gotten the full dose of what Odunze is as a player. There's a reason that Ryan Poles almost traded up from where they were picking initially to go get him. There's a reason that Odunze almost forced Ian Cunningham to tell Ryan Poles to chill the fuck out before he did something too stupid. And they were elated to get him at where they were picking in this year's draft. I think he's still a key starter because to me in this current NFL, 3 receivers are starters. Like your top 3 guys are starters on the team. You run enough slot and you run enough 3 wide where that's just the case in today's NFL. I think he's still a key starter on this offense. I agree with you guys though. I'm absolutely excited to see what he does the rest of the season. I hope it's just a continued ascent from here for him, but through 6 weeks, I got him as a B+.
I've got him as a B+ too. And this is, I want him to be an A- here. I do, but I have a hard time giving it that without the production, without the actual results going his way yet. I think they will. As Sonny said, we'll probably discuss this a little more later on the show in the hot take segment, but I think there's some big stuff coming for Rome in the next back half of the season, probably. So we'll get to that later. But for now, I'm just going to leave it at I got a B+ for him here, and I think my grading scale is a little wonky because I have 2 B+ and an A- resulting in an A-, but we're just going to ride with it. Now, moving on to Keenan Allen, and I'll kick this one off. Give him a B-. And this is a little lower. B- is a starter, right? A guy who would start on any team in the league, but you have a hard time saying much more than that. And really, if you dive into it, with his numbers right now, with his production, it's probably the slowest. What has he played? 4 games? The least receiving yards he's ever had in a 4-game stretch of his career, or at least as a true ever since he became an established starter in the league. I do think there is a little bit of something to worry about here with his age, with any changes. I don't think it's time to hit a panic button or anything, but it's time to keep an eye on it for me. Is he the same guy? We know that he can catch the tight window throws, the contested balls in the short middle of the field. But last year there was a guy who separated a little better than what we've seen this year. And I'm wondering when we're going to start to see that. And maybe some of that's the chemistry. Maybe some of that's the offense, learning a new offense for the first time and, or at least building new chemistry while learning a new offense for the first time since Justin Herbert was drafted, really. That chemistry does matter. So we'll see where that goes. But I have a hard time going up to plus starter until I see more production. Ron, what are you thinking?
I don't hate a B minus grade. Scott agrees with you there, Q. He says B minus, a few too many drops for Scott's liking. I think right now I would put him as a B. I think he's still a plus starter. Keenan Allen is one of the best route runners in football. And that's something that no matter what your speed is, it's still going to allow you to win. I just don't think we've seen enough of him to, like you said, gel with Caleb. And I think that's why it's really easy to kind of be down on his numbers and his grade so far. And again, he's not the guy, which he has historically been his entire career with the Chargers. You know, he was the number one receiving option virtually at all times in his career. Now he's not necessarily that. Hell, he might be the number 4 option in this offense if you really think about it when it's all said and done. That being said, Chicago is where wide receivers go to die. No, I'm just kidding. But I almost get shades of Moose and Muhammad with Keenan Allen. It's late in his career. He's been around for a long time. He's had a lot of success. I think he's had more success than Moose and Muhammad had in his career if you look at the total package. But I think he's still a plus starter. Like I think there was a reason everybody was excited when the Bears got him for a 4th round draft pick in the offseason. So, you know, I think the numbers can be better. I think you'll see the chemistry come around with Caleb, especially now after this bye week. And I think he's finally fully somewhat healthy for the first time really all season. I think we're going to be okay with Keenan, but I'll give him a B. I'll give him a B.
Sonny, what are your thoughts?
I'm with Q and Scott, B minus. For me, if we didn't know it was Keenan Allen, I think this would have probably been everyone's grade. I think just the fact that he's missed games this year already. And honestly, I still think about that first potential touchdown drop of Caleb Williams' career in that first game. You know, not something you expected from Keenan Allen, the wide receiver. I'm not going to elaborate too much because you guys kind of, I think, covered it all. I think he's still a good NFL player. He's not at the point where he's a rotational guy by any stretch of the imagination. But I wish I had seen more and not, you know, it's not that I just haven't seen more on the field, but he's also missed a couple games. So it's hard for me to really give anything beyond a B minus.
All right. So that results in a B overall for him, a low end B. But Ron, do you have a strong opinion on DeAndre Carter?
I actually do kind of have a strong opinion on DeAndre Carter. I think he's been a bit of a breath of fresh air as a depth receiver. I'm going to call him a rotational player. I think he's a C+ in my book. I think because of what he brings on special teams, improves his value as a return man. I think he's been electric as a returner. I think that was a great addition by the Bears. I think it's also been great by the coaching staff to not be too what's the term I'm looking for, stubborn with Velus Jones being the return man and just saying DeAndre Carter's a better option. We're going to go with the better player. And in addition, he looked good early in the season when Keenan was out as kind of that third receiver. Like he looked solid. Again, I wouldn't call him a true starter in the NFL, but I think he is very much a rotational player. He's absolutely quality depth given what he can do on special teams. And I overall like the player. So I'm going to give DeAndre Carter a C+.
Sonny, what do you think?
I'll give him a C+ too, because that's the grade that Q put down. If you're watching this on YouTube, for me giving him. No, but I think I'm good with C+. As Ron said,
excuse me, that's my bad.
It's all good. It's pretty much along the lines of what I was thinking anyway. You know, he's fine. You know, he hasn't really been noticed. He hasn't been noticeable. Like, you know, when so-and-so got hurt, that backup played awful. So that's kind of all you ask for a player in DeAndre in his role. So C+ it is.
Yeah, and I think I gave him a C here, and I'm willing to bump this up to a C+ the more I think about it. I don't think I thought this one through that much while I was throwing it in there.
Through again, I love it.
Really, I mean, one of the reasons I'm willing to do it is because this is a guy who's backed up Keenan Allen for years now. This is a guy who came into Keenan Allen goes down. He was able to step right in Keenan Allen's role because he knows how to be Keenan Allen. Like, not he can't be Keenan Allen, but he knows how to play the role that he's being asked to play, which makes it a really nice signing for Ryan Poles to me of like, okay, this guy can return punts, kicks, and he's a strong Keenan Allen safety net of like, we have someone who knows how to play the role, knows some of the nuance that Keenan brings to his game, because he's done it for so long behind Keenan. For those who might not know, Carter was with the Chargers for years before the Bears, and he was always the backup there to Keenan Allen. So to that point, to me, I'm okay with bumping up to a plus. Now, Sonny, how you doing on Cole Kmet?
I'm jumping back and forth between a B plus and an A minus.
I don't remember what my grade was. I was changing it, and I was hoping that would be blind. It wasn't, so now everyone knows my grade. But we're learning. We're learning.
No, I'm going to go with A minus. I'm going to go with A minus. And it probably was going to be a B plus, but now that I see how good of a special team snapper he is, I'm going to knock it up to an A minus. I just think he's one of Caleb's best friends. He's plays that tight end role perfectly for what we're asking for him. He's one of our top, two, if not three options that Caleb's looking for. He's just come through for us this year, and he's been arguably our best player and on the offensive end. So I'm going to put at A minus.
Ron, what are you thinking?
I am also going to put Cole Kmet as an A minus here. As a matter of fact, an interesting note that I didn't realize until I just dove into some numbers here. Cole Kmet on the course of the season has 26 catches on just 29 targets. That's hella efficient from Mr. Cole Kmet. He's already almost approaching 300 yards through just 6 games for a tight end, which is immaculate. And 3 touchdowns. I'm going to save a lot of what I have about Cole Kmet for a little bit later, but I'm very positive on Mr. Cole Kmet. I got him as an A minus.
Yeah, and as we already know, I'm with you guys. A minus makes all the sense in the world to me, and it's the guy clearly put in a ton of work this offseason on his body. He is a different route runner than we've ever seen Cole Kmet be. He is so much more capable, much more of a threat in man coverage right now than we've ever really seen him be. And that goes a long way to me. I do think some of his production is also, the benefit of playing with DJ Moore and Odunze and Keenan Allen and DeAndre Swift. And there's a lot of weapons to account for. And he kind of falls under the radar on some of that, especially when he's being held in the block as much as he is. That creates opportunities and layers for him to get really involved with some big yardage plays. Now, a part of me wants to go A because I'm that impressed with him so far this year. But the only thing that holds me back is you cut some weight, you gain that flexibility, you lose a bit of your punch as a blocker, and I do not think he has been – I don't think that he's a strong blocker. I think he's a strong player who does enough with blocking technique, with actually with executing his blocking assignment, but he's gotten away with maybe being a bit more lax in some of the technique for most of his career because he's been just bigger and stronger than a lot of guys. This year, I think he isn't quite as strong from that cut weight, and I do think that has impacted his blocking some. There are quite a few run block plays where it's okay, well, that busted because the tight end couldn't hit this. Some of that's on Waldron. Some of that has to fall on the player, and that's the only thing that keeps Kmet from it being A for me.
I will say, Q, just one small rebuttal. Also want to get to some comments because there's some incredible comments here. Scott from Iowa has Cole Kmet as an A+. We got a B+ from Bear Truth 9. Ron here says A+ for Kmet, another 2 touchdowns the last game. And also here, Cole Kmet, 3rd most tight end yards, 2nd in touchdowns in the league. And then Kmet is an angry runner, according to Ron. I know you said Cole Kmet produced this season because of being potentially the 4th option in the offense when he was only the 2nd option in the offense last year. Over 700 yards on 73 catches. So yeah. I think that still highlights, even with all the mouths to feed, still very much an important receiver in that scheme of the offense.
Yeah, no, I think that's a great point. Now, Ron, while you're on the mic, where are we sitting at for Gerald Everett?
No, Jesus. He's a C. He's fine.
Oh.
He's quality depth. It's one of those. Oh, Sonny, are you gonna give him a C too?
I don't think Q likes my opinion, so he's like,
You guys, red zone fried my brain. I apologize.
Oh no, you're good, Q. You're good. I think he's a C. I think he's still quality depth. Like he's a tight end that I'm not mad that's on the roster. I think that's a nice safety blanket to have. God forbid something happens to Cole Kmet. I also think he's a good veteran voice in that locker room because he's been with Shane Waldron more than once. He knows how that offense works. He understands the method of what he's expected to do. I think early in the season, they tried to get the ball to him too much, and it was borderline nauseating at this point in his career. I think if this is Gerald Everett 4 years ago, it's a little bit of a different story. He's a quality depth player. I think he's great for what he does on this Bears team, and I'm not like Sonny and I kind of echoed each other on the defense show, right? We're happy he's here. I'm okay with him being the tight end too. But I think at this point in his career, he's a quality depth player, and that's what he should be on any successful football team.
Sonny, do you agree?
I'm going to go with C-. And I think it's because I don't think it's his fault. I think he's a quality player, but just what Ron just mentioned, like I hated how much we try to force him the ball early in the year that I think it left a bad taste in my mouth thinking that Gerald himself was washed, which now, looking back, I don't think he is. I just think that, as Ron said, he's not suited for a huge role anymore. I like Ron C grade, but I put down C-, so I'll just stick with that.
And I'm actually curious. I know I've looked this up before, but I need to look it up again right now on the show because it's going to drive me crazy. So Gerald Everett was drafted in 2017 to the Rams. And wouldn't you know it, Shane Waldron was the Rams tight end coach in 2017. That's his guy. Like, that's Shane Waldron's dude. He pounded the table for Gerald Everett, and he got Gerald Everett, and Gerald Everett has followed him to now 2 different spots after being drafted. Like, there's love there between the two. They're bros. Like, they see eye to eye with stuff. But I gave him a C-. I think Everett, like you said, Sonny, I don't think to any fault of his own. I think he's just not quite the player that he used to be, but there's still benefit to having him. He knows the way the NFL works. He knows stuff within the locker room, within the playbook. He's probably helping Cole Kmet learn concepts. Like, I do think there's value to him being here, but some of the execution early in the year and this is probably more reflection on Ryan Poles and Shane Waldron than Gerald Everett himself, but the guy's basically a blocking tight end right now with the production he's having as a receiver. So he's a blocking tight end who's not that good at blocking. And it's like that. I don't know if that's what you really are looking for. So depth, he doesn't really give you the special teams aspect. I think he's fine depth, but I can't quite get to quality depth until we see a bit more. Like, if he goes out and has a few touchdown catches the next 5 weeks, okay, then I'm like back up to quality depth, because that's what I envision him being, right? A red zone threat and a voice in the locker room who's helping guys learn the playbook. And the red zone part hasn't really come together yet. So I have a hard time going above C- until we see that happen. Now, starting off with you, Sonny, where are you sitting at for Marcedes Lewis?
I'll probably just
Do it.
No, I'm not. I'm just going with C- again. I think that the value that he provides is probably the locker room presence that Ron mentioned earlier. I mean, there's a reason he's been in the league for a very, very long time. I think maybe he's been a good mentor towards Cole Kmet, and the jump that he's had. So maybe he's had a solid influence on Cole's career. I don't have much else to say. He's your tight end 3, and you can do worse at your tight end 3 spot, but it's not like anything has jumped out at me this year.
Ron, what do you think?
When do these guys get a pension from the NFL? I think Marcedes Lewis got his a decade ago, right?
Mm-hmm.
At this point in his life. I tend to agree. And Scott asks, how many locker room guys do you need? You'd be surprised. The more locker room guys you have in there, the better. Truly. There's a reason that culture is such a big thing in football. If you have, if you only have 3 or 4 culture guys in a room full of hooligans, the culture is not going to work. Like, you need locker room guys all over the place. It's not just one or two. And I think that he is a good voice in that tight end room. I think he and Gerald Everett at this point in their careers are good for a guy like Cole Kmet as he continues to ascend in his career. Still a young player too. Cole Kmet still just 25 years old. Scott gives Lewis a D+. I think I'm going to roll with Scott on this one. I'm going to give him a D+. It's just like I asked, hey, you want to get your pension, brother. I understand, but you got it a decade ago. I was going through puberty when you got your pension, my friend. Like, you're good. You know, you can be an influence in that locker room. Just be the tight end coach. Don't put pads on, because even this year with the blocking, and I think he has more penalties than he does like successful snaps as a tight end so far this season. So I'm going to be a little more negative on Marcedes. I love the player. He's had a hell of a career. I think he's a guy that, you know, you don't stick around the NFL for 20 years if you're, you know, a schmuck, but it's been a long time.
Yeah, and I gave him a C- here, but I have to be pessimistic at some point. It's just eating at me.
Do it.
So I'm changing this over to a D+, because as I'm sitting here thinking it through, I'm like, looking at our scales. Is he questionable depth? I think he's questionable depth at this point, and I hope he proves me wrong. I love his aspect from a locker room aspect, from a leadership aspect. I do think that weighs heavily in their building, but you need to be able to do it on the field. And I'm not sure he's been showing a lot as a blocker on the field, and that's really what he's here to do. So I have to kick that to a D+. And I'm going to say, forget our GPA range over here, because if we have 2 D+ and a C-, I think that's a D+. So I'm gonna do that, and I'm gonna adjust the others up here, like that takes Everett to like a C-. I think that's the more fair way to do it. It's eating at me that it's like 2 C- and a C, and
Sonny, we broke him.
Is still a C.
For sure. He's so distracted right now.
We finally broke him. He's back to being pessimistic Q. The D+ is all it took. It's all it took.
It took us 40 minutes of talking about Bears football, and now he's back.
And he's back.
Yeah, you knew it was coming.
And he said, "The hell with my GPA method." He's a D+.
All right, Ron, where are we at with Darnell Wright?
Oh, A-, baby. A- all the way. I love Darnell Wright. I think Darnell Wright, Q, you and I talked about this just this past week on our O-line film room show. I think Darnell Wright is one of my favorite offensive linemen to watch block, because he does everything against the norm. And I think that's why he's so fun to watch, because to me, there's some part of Darnell Wright's game where him being unconventional, the reason he does it is to purposely throw off defensive ends. And you see it. Like, he throws punches with the different arms sometimes. Like, he's very clearly watching film on guys and is showing off. Again, I have him as an A- right now. I don't think Scott's far off here when he says A. I think before Darnell Wright's career is over, he's going to get at least one All-Pro nod, because I think he's that good, because he makes shit look easy. And I think a better offensive line as a whole will help him get to that A status of being a true All-Pro player. But he is 100% a blue chip starter and a franchise cornerstone, in my opinion. I think he is one of the most important players on the field. And again, I love watching that dude play football, because he does everything against the grain, and that's freaking cool and tough. And I love to see it. So he's an A- for me.
Sonny, what do you think?
I'll say A- as well, but I'll preface this for the crowd watching and listening later. I'm going to be talking very minimal when it comes to the offensive line. Q and Ron, they're line guys. If you don't know, they have an offensive line show every single week, which I try to tune into, and you should absolutely as well. And I feel like a lot of my opinions are going to be piggybacking yours, because I already know what you guys have talked about every single week when it comes to these guys. I just don't have the eye for it nearly as much. But I'm just as excited as Ron is about what I see with Darnell Wright. So A-, but 100% has that ceiling to be an A.
And I went with a B here. And
damn it, he's back.
Yeah, okay. Yeah,
I'm back.
I'm
back.
Okay.
Now, that's a plus starter. And I think Darnell Wright healthy is a key starter to a blue chip. I just don't think he's healthy right now. And I think that back issue is something that's going to linger all year long, and it's going to limit him. We saw him play great against some weaker edge rushers. Then we saw him do well against Jacksonville, which Jacksonville did have some good edge rushers, but we also saw him get beat a few times. And between that and the Houston game, where it was like, okay, this might be one of the best edge rooms in the NFL, but they beat him a handful of times where it was like, it's hard for me to put an A on that. I do think Wright, when healthy, can stand in there with anyone and win. I just don't think he's healthy, and I think that's impacting his performance. So to me, it might not be fair, but his performance at this point is a B, and I think it's largely because of injury. But
Fair.
That puts his final grade at an A minus still. So we'll give it to him. A minus. Now, Sonny, do you want to start with Braxton or any of these O linemen, or should I kick him to Ron first? What are your thoughts there?
I mean, my thinking is I'll just give the grade, and then I'll let you guys expound on it. And we'll see if we're close. Okay. You know what I mean? Okay. I'll say Braxton Jones for me, B minus. He's a starter in the league. I think. That PFF grade's a little higher than I thought it was going to be. So maybe
PFF loves Braxton.
Yeah, I might be off on this one. I'm actually kind of surprised when I peered over there. But
no, PFF is. I can explain this. Sorry, I don't mean to interrupt, but it's something I think about a lot because I grade these guys and I always compare my grades to PFF after the fact, and it's like PFF had Adrian Amos as the best safety in the league back in 2018, and Adrian Amos was good. He wasn't the best safety in the league. PFF really likes guys who fit in their box of what's good for their grading. And for their box, Braxton Jones does a good job. Their box is probably, 2.5 seconds of keeping the quarterback clean, don't get beat around the edge. And they're not really paying that much attention to the anchor or some other aspects that I think are important to look at. But so they really like Braxton's grades. But I'm sorry if I threw off your train of thought. That was a trigger point for me.
No, it wasn't it piggybacked on exactly what I was talking about. My grade was B minus, then I peered over there and I saw 71.4, and I'm like, wait, again, I guess we'll see. You know what? Let me cede the floor to you two, and let's see what you guys think. Then we'll see if you're closer to me or PFF.
Yeah, I agree with Sonny here. I think a B minus is a good spot for Braxton Jones. I know Scott's calling for a needed upgrade with the first round pick next year and calling him a C plus. Bear Truth 9's calling him a C. Braxton Jones can start in this league. Yeah. And let me preface this to everybody at home that thinks they understand what it's like to play offensive line unless you actually have. Offensive line is the hardest fucking position in football outside of maybe cornerback and quarterback. Quarterback is the hardest position intellectually in football. Cornerback is the hardest position athletically in football. From a physicality standpoint, offensive line is the hardest position in football because you are not allowed to hold guys, but you need to keep a guy in front of you who is just as big as you are. He gets a sprinter's start when you have to go, come here, Big Papa, I'm ready. And just take it and eat it. It's a hard position to play. People sit around and bitch about the offensive line in football in general. Offensive line plays not clean. It's hard to do. It's like guarding a guy in basketball. There's a reason that they score 120 points in basketball because it's hard to play defense. It's the same way of playing offensive line. It's hard to do. Braxton Jones is a starter. He is a starter. I think Braxton Jones, when fully healthy, and Q, we talked about this, I think before that back injury he had last year, I think Braxton Jones was on a trajectory to being a key starter. I really do. Mm-hmm. But I don't know what that did to him. He's playing higher now. His anchor doesn't look as solid as it used to be. He still looks athletic in the run game, especially when he's out in space. He still moves guys really, really well. But kind of like what Bear Truth 9 says here, he's on his skates a lot, and I think that has to do with that back injury, unfortunately, which is tragic, absolutely tragic. Because I think Braxton Jones was on his pace to being a key starter and being an absolute steal of a 5th round pick at left tackle, at one of the hardest positions in football to get it right. And it kind of saddens me. I'm not going to sit here and lie to you. It really does. But I think he's still a starter in this league. I do. This offensive line has been fine. I know everybody's bitching and moaning, but there's very few years of teams that have the Eagles and the Lions offensive lines. That's rare. And look at that Lions offensive line. It's because they took guys in the first round and they signed guys to big money deals. That's going to be something that you're going to have to keep an eye on with Ryan Poles in the offseason, but I'll get off my soapbox. He's a B minus.
And I'm with you guys. B- is where I was sitting. And to some of what Ron was saying, I have a tinfoil hat theory on Braxton that because you look at this past year's draft, you had Kingsley Suamatea, who barely played football, but he checked all the measurables. Guy went in the second round. You had Karan Amagaji, the Bears' own, checks all the measurable boxes, coming off an injury. Came into camp still nursing that injury. Goes in the third round. Braxton Jones checked a lot of boxes. Guys who check those boxes don't tend to fall to the fifth unless there's an injury red flag. Which makes me think a lot of the NFL probably knew this guy could be good, but they also had an idea that there's an injury around the corner at some point that might limit his career. And I'm just wondering if we hit that last year with the neck injury, that maybe it impacted his back as well. But I don't think he moves the same as he used to when I put the tape side by side. So B-, I do think he's a starter. I think he's a top 50 tackle in this league, which means you're a starter. There's 64 starting tackles. I think he's definitely a top 50 offensive tackle, but I don't know if I want a guy who's in the lower half of that top 50 starting at left tackle for me. Like that's the trouble. And I think that's a lot the trouble for everybody is you don't want the lower end of the starters in the league, but a starter is still a starter in my mind. So B- fits here.
Q, there's a couple of quick good comments here that I want to share when we're on the topic of Braxton. DBB says here, still a steal of a pick.
Mm-hmm.
Braxton Jones has provided tens of millions of dollars in surplus value. Absolutely, completely agree with that. And I like what Bear Truth 9 says here, Q. I think this rounds out what you said perfectly. He says he agrees that he could start, and he likes Braxton. He just doesn't want him to be the left tackle for Caleb Williams, right? Like it's you want the best at left tackle for your right-handed throwing quarterback. So completely understand and completely agree. I also agree with you, Q. There's something there with the injury. I don't think he's the same player that he was his rookie season, unfortunately.
Yeah, and I'll kick off Coleman Shelton here. I give Shelton a C. I think Shelton's quality depth. If he had more positional versatility, I would give him C+ as rotational player. There's not really rotational offensive lineman, but in my mind, the difference between quality depth and rotational player on the offensive line is a guy who can play multiple spots. I don't think Coleman can. I think he's a center. So at that point, he's center depth. That's not the most valuable thing, but like it's still, I think he's a depth center who has a lot of experience starting in this league. So to me, that's a quality depth. That's a C. But Ron, where are you sitting on this one?
I think you said it perfectly. Quality depth. I think the reason he's here is because he understands the offense. I think we all know that. He's coming from a place where he's here because of the mental aspect. We got fucking fired. There's a reason he's here. Mm-hmm. But I think, Scott calls him C-. I think that's a little – I think he's still quality depth. Like I would be happy if he's my 6th or 7th offensive lineman on the roster. I just don't love him as my starting center, especially when he looks undersized at this point. Q, I know you and I have had the tinfoil hat takes and talks of, he cut weight potentially to be more athletic and agile at the center position. So I agree with you, C.
Sonny, what are you thinking?
I'm going to go with C as well. I wish he was the backup center. I wish, but the fact that he's starting, I think, leaves a bad taste in a lot of people's mouth. But for what he does, he's fine. We just wish we didn't have to watch him play every single play.
Yeah, I think that's a fair assessment. Ron, how you feeling about Tev?
Tev's a B- for me. I'm going to be a little down on Tev. I think Tev's had a weird season. I think, the first couple games, he didn't look like himself. You and I talked about this on the last film room show as well. He looks a little more like himself again now. So like, he's still a starter. He's a very good player. I'm not mad that he's the starting left guard for the Chicago Bears. I think the injury concerns certainly weigh him down a little bit. I think if that injury concern wasn't attached to Tev, I would probably bump him up to a B or even a B+. I think that drags him down a little bit. So I have him as B-. He's a starter. He's playing fine. I hope by the end of the year, I change my grade to something more optimistic. And maybe that means he's getting a new contract with the Chicago Bears. But I think at this pace right now, from what I've seen, he's a starter in the league. And it just might not be with the Chicago Bears after this season.
And Scott's with you. But Sonny, are you with Ron?
I'm with Ron. I'm with Scott. For me, Tevin's just one of those guys where, again, I think how bad this offensive line, the perception was a little overblown. But at the same time, it's not a good offensive line either, And so Teven, just like I gave the same grade for Braxton, I think he's a starter in this league. And certainly there's teams out there who wish they had a guy like Teven as on their offensive line, but there's still more out there. And so B-, solid starter in the NFL.
And I'm with both you guys. I had this at a B-. The first 4 games, he didn't look like himself, and that has to be a factor here. Like, he looked like he could probably still start in this league, and then he got hurt. And ever since he got hurt, he started to look like the guy from last year, who was a solid B+. So I end up keeping it at B- because, I mean, if we're being honest, the first few games, he looked like a guy who maybe wasn't a starter in this league. And it was like, you take away his aggression and his power, he's just slow, so that is his differentiator, using that power. And once he started being aggressive out there on the field again, that's when he started looking like himself again, looking like a good player in this league. I hope he can stay healthy enough to stay on the field. And I only put it that way because he's already hurt. But if he can stay on the field while playing with this mentality, I think he's going to get paid somewhere a decent contract. Now, moving on to Matt Pryor. And Sonny, I'm gonna throw this one to you first. What are you giving Matt Pryor?
I'm gonna cede this to you guys at this point. I'll probably just put C. I think he's good at his role. I'm not a film guy as much as you guys are, so I feel like, I hope I'm not stealing your guys' grades here, but I've listened to you guys for a couple of weeks now. Grading these offensive lines, so I feel like they might be familiar. I don't want to steal your guys' words too, so I'll let you guys elaborate.
Ron, what are you thinking here?
Sonny, you're spot on here, bud. C. I agree. I like Matt Pryor as a quality depth option. I think he's a great swing tackle. I think he is absolutely able to play guard, but like Scott says, he's a little too big to play guard. He really is, because of the nature of what you're asked to do as an offensive guard. It's a real thing. I think a C is honestly the perfect grade for a guy like Matt Pryor. I love his physicality. He's just slow as shit.
And I went with a B-. I'm actually changing that to a C+. I think I was a little over the top on that one, but rotational player to me. He gives, like I said earlier, to me, a rotational player in the offensive line is a guy who can cover multiple positions and be a quality backup, quality O-line 6, who can play guard and tackle, maybe play left and right. That's Matt Pryor to me. So that fits to me. I'm going with the C+. Now, Ron, what are we giving Mr. Nate Davis?
First off, a quick shout out to Mr. Colby Marcio in the comment section. Good to see you, man. How do I put this? You got benched for Matt Pryor. D-. Next question.
I respect it. And Sonny, are you going to agree with that?
I was going to go with D, so I'll put a D. But yeah, I'll let you guys talk.
Q, really quick. I will add one quick thing here before you go. Let me put it this way. My hot take for the defense was Kevin Byard was the best free agent signing that Ryan Poles has made in his tenure. Nate Davis is by far the worst.
Yeah, I think that's fair. And I mean, here's where I struggle with Nate Davis's grade, because I wanted to give him a D, right? I gave him a C initially. I'm bumping it down to a C- because I'm not sure there are many backups who are better than him in the league. Like, I'm not sure there are many guys who I want coming off the bench that outside of Nate Davis on the Bears roster. Like, I like Bill Murray coming off the bench. I'd like to see him for future purposes, but I know Nate Davis can start in this league, and I do feel like his tape has not been that bad this year. I think the issues are more internal in the building there, which I have a hard time actually weighing into my grade. So to me, I'm going C-. He's depth. He's passable depth at the least, in my opinion, unless there's stuff going on at Hallis Hall that we don't know about, which there very well might be. But I have a hard time factoring that in because I just don't know. So I'm going with the C- here for considering his contract. That sucks. That just sucks. Like, you paid him to be a plus starter and you are getting a depth player. So I think that is that to me, that feels like a fair assessment.
What kind of chips are we trading him for, as Ron asks here? He says for a bag of chips. Like, is it like a barbecue Jay's chips, or are we like jalapeno crunchers chips here?
That's
like,
what I was saying. We can't even expect the top of the line chips. We can't get the sour cream and onion Pringles. We'd have to settle for the original because that's where his trade level's at this point.
We're getting the Walmart brand.
Both people. We got multiple Lays here too. A lot of Lays haters in the comments.
Ron, last guy here, the one and only of Space Jam fame, Bill Murray. What do you got for Bill?
I like Bill Murray. I'm going to give Bill Murray a C+ because I think he can play both guard spots. I think if he got enough tick, I don't know if he has, he probably could play center just based on his build and kind of his skill set. I like Bill Murray. I like what we've seen so far. I know we haven't seen a ton of him, but I think in the limited action that we have, you and I very much highlighted Bill Murray just a few shows ago on the film room stuff. I like him. I think he's a really nice depth player. I think that's a good find for the Bears. I think I give him the C+ because I think he can play multiple places on the offensive line. It's the kind of guy you want coming off the bench, but he's fine. He's a player that I'm happy is on the roster. And an electric name, the fact that his name Bill Murray in Chicago. It's like, what could you have better than that?
Right. It kind of worked out perfectly. And I'll go ahead and jump into mine here. Assuming it'll let me show it. There we go. I went with the C+ as well. Rotational player. I hope he can be more than that. Like, his tape looked like a starter. It was against Carolina, though, so that makes it all a muddy picture. But I want to see more of this guy. Until we do, I think he's at the very least a strong rotational player because I saw him win against a bad D-line very consistently. Now, Sonny, what are your thoughts here?
I mean, I just had him at C, but again, it's simply just because of lack of film.
And that's fair. Like, yeah, I think that's a valid
thing.
Came
down to that. I don't know if it was just a really good burst in the time that he did have, and whether he kind of regresses to norm, or if he's the type of player you guys are talking about. Obviously, yeah, he could be a C+. Who knows? Maybe a B- player down the road, but there's just not much to watch. So I just put him down as because at least I know he's quality depth, right? Like I can comfortably say that, and so C it is.
And so we end up with the quarterback at a B+, the running back position at a B, wide receiver position at a B+, tight end at a B, offensive tackles at a B+, which might be a bit of a surprise to some. But when you've only got two guys, I think that you haven't had a lot of guys coming in and out of the lineup. And then the interior O-line being the clear weak spot, getting a C+, an average of a rotational player on the interior. So that's clearly the weakness on this roster, offensive roster. But with that being said, we ran a little long here, so we still got hot takes to do, boys. Let's get into some hot takes. Let's kick it over to Sonny first. Sonny, what is your hot take about the Chicago Bears offense?
So I kind of alluded to this earlier that I was going to reference this player, and I saw it over this bye week, and if I saw it over this bye week, the coaching staff certainly saw it over the bye week. And I think that by the end of the season, Odunze could be the wide receiver one on the Chicago Bears team. I just think that had we not known, if we had to wipe our memories and simply watch the players on the field and the game tape, and we didn't see the names on the back of those jerseys, everyone would be pointing out at Rome. And I think this is something, if me, a guy who's not necessarily as much of a film guy as you two are, if I can see it, certainly the smart guys in that locker room see it. And I think that coming out of this bye week, buy on Odunze. I think his stock is going to go up, and not just up, but way up.
I agree with you on that. Like we were chatting a little before the show, and that's how we realized we might have the same hot take here. So I ended up I'm going to my backup after Ron speaks. I'll get to it, but I think it's pretty clear Rome is winning routes at a high level, and the majority of his targets are very heavily skewed to the deep portion of the field. His average depth of targets over 15 right now. I want to see that number come down. I want to see some higher percentage throws going his way, because I really think he can win at all three levels of the field in that prototypical wide receiver one frame and athletic body. Like DJ Moore, I love DJ Moore. DJ Moore's great. DJ Moore is a bit different of a wide receiver one, right? There's some more gadget capability to him. There's some the way that he plays the game isn't your prototypical route winner number one receiver that you typically look for. And I think you can work with that, but when you have that typical wide receiver one on your roster, why wouldn't you use that to get DJ Moore better looks in a different role? And I think that that's something that we're going to see coming out of the bye. Ron, do you have any thoughts on it?
Yeah, I think just to add on, because I really like that spicy take, and that's something now that I feel like I need to go watch more film, because I need to watch more of the things that are coming downfield. I think really what will be key to watch, Rome Odunze, like you said, Q, is kind of that prototypical wide receiver one in terms of the physical traits, right? He's your AJ Brown, he's your Jamar Chase, he's your Justin Jefferson. He's built a little more like a true number one, whereas like DJ Moore's built more like a Tyreek Hill. And I'm not saying he's necessarily the same player as Tyreek Hill, but stylistically they're very similar. They're yak kings. They are guys that make plays in open field after the catch. They are athletes. And that's a great thing to have as a wide receiver one. I think it's even better when those are your two top targets and they are complements of each other on the football field. I do think there is a world where if Rome Odunze is the number one receiver on the Bears, I think that makes DJ Moore even more of a weapon over the course of the year, because I think it gives him more of those open looks that we have failed to see him really get in the first 6 weeks. So I hope you guys are right. I think that's a great hot take that I hope does come to fruition, because if it does, I think we see a more efficient Bears wide receiver room. And I think we see a world where maybe, just maybe, and it's going to taste like vinegar coming out of my mouth, because I just don't even know if it could be potentially true, because it's the Chicago Bears. But could you imagine having two 1,000-yard receivers on the same roster?
Whew. Brandon Marshall, Alshon Jeffrey, brother. It's been a long time coming. To your point, though, I think of it as, you say Tyreek Hill. I think that's a good example. I think of it a bit more as Deebo Samuel. Right? Brandon Ayuk does the true number one wide receiver stuff there, and Debo is such a weapon in so many ways. And I think that is what I would be looking to try to emulate. Obviously, I think they're going to use more slot because they have Keenan. Like within that, it's not just going to be a Kyle Shanahan, like two receiver set offense, but like I'm looking for ways to integrate Deebo Samuel style stuff for DJ Moore. But Ron, to your hot take, what do you got?
I had to really think hard about this one. I feel like it was a lot easier to find some hot takes about the defense than it was the offense at this point in the year. And I bounced around trying to think of if there's something maybe with Caleb that was worth bringing up. And I said, no. And then I was like, maybe the offensive line. And I was like, no. And then I found it. Cole Kmet might be the single most important player on this offense. That is my hot take. Because when Cole Kmet is humming, it just seems like the rest of the offense is humming. And I even look back to last season, and I know it's a different cast of characters. It's not Justin Fields at quarterback. It's now Caleb Williams, and it's not Luke Getsy calling the offense. It's Shane Waldron. But late in the season, when Cole Kmet was putting up numbers, the offense was succeeding. And just like diamonds are a girl's best friend, a tight end is a young quarterback's best friend. And that's what Cole Kmet is right now for a guy like Caleb Williams. And you saw it in London. In a game where you're out of your element, you're playing in different sight lines. It's an unaccustomed environment for them. And the Jacksonville Jaguars are going to key in on DJ Moore and Rome Odunze because they are weapons. What better way to get your offense going than have your tight end wide open down the middle of the field on a double fake screen of all things, as we talked about a show a week ago. I think Cole Kmet there's a reason he's getting paid $11 million a year as a tight end. He might be the most single-handedly important piece on the field, because with him running down the middle, you have to respect every other weapon on that offense, including a DeAndre Swift, including Rome Odunze and DJ Moore. Hell, even Keenan Allen, I think, benefits from Cole Kmet. Cole Kmet is such a nightmare for linebackers and safeties alike over the middle of the field that I think maybe, just maybe, even if it's not in the box score, I think for what he does and what he brings to the offense, I think he's the most important piece on the field that is not the quarterback.
I think that's a good take. Truly, I do. I think his ability to occupy a single high safety deep by running up the seam, that is how you open the middle of the field to other things when you're facing middle of the field close coverages, right? You occupy that deep safety, and then, suddenly middle field might be open now. You might be dealing with a linebacker or a nickel corner, but like you think Keenan Allen can beat that coming over the middle. So you start to feel good about it because they need to respect Cole Kmet's speed up that seam. It's something that I think makes sense. And Sonny, do you want to give any thoughts on the Cole Kmet aspect?
No, I like it. I think Cole Kmet's emergence this year is what makes us all collectively not so worried about, DJ Moore's stats not being where they tend to be in the past, Keenan Allen not performing to what we kind of hoped Keenan Allen would be doing up until this point. So, I like what Ron said. And I think, Cole Kmet's emergence this year is one of the reasons that we're playing as well as we are. And he very well might be the most important player on that offense.
Yeah, and then so getting into my hot take. I know, Sonny, you might have to drop here for a minute. So, do you have any final thoughts you want to put out there before you have to jump?
No, I'm just glad, that we got to do this, kind of review the first 6 weeks. I can't wait to do this again, in the next bye week and see, kind of compare and contrast these grades and see, whether they follow through with the trajectory. Most of it was positive, and there might be a couple of negatives here and there, but we all know the tough part of the schedule is coming up. And so, we'll see what happens. But again, I do have to drop off, so I apologize. But Q, I'll be listening, and I'm looking forward to your backup hot take.
Yeah. So to jump into my hot take here, and my initial one was along the Odunze line. So I had my backup, and I like my backup. I don't know if I fully buy into my backup, but that's what a hot take is, right? We're here to push the edge of what we actually believe, right? So
It's got to be spicy.
DeAndre Swift's the MVP at the bye week. As DeAndre Swift goes, this offense goes. This offense looked like crap until DeAndre Swift started putting up explosive runs, explosive catches, explosive gains. Each of the last 3 games, he has an explosive gain. He has a touchdown. As he has gone, this offense has gone. He picked up this offense in multiple times over the last 3-4 games where it felt like they didn't have a lot going. And then suddenly Swift breaks something. It's like, okay, I can forgive some of that bad vision we saw early in the season. I can forgive some of the, doesn't actually break tackles very much and kind of goes down a little easy. When you have that shiftiness and the explosiveness he has shown, and if we want to tie in the Cole Kmet aspect, how much harder does that get to defend when you have Swift coming out of the backfield at the same time that no linebacker in the league can cover? Like that's a factor here that is playing big, and he is by far the best producer on the Bears right now. From a season-long aspect, he has put up the numbers. This offense, it runs through him right now. And I think that there's a very clear case to that.
Yeah, and Ron here with saying Swift is turning it up a notch. Q, I think that's a hot take, but I don't think it's as hot as you think it is, because I'm kind of right there with you. And I think there's something to be said. You look at the offenses that Waldron has worked under. In St. Louis, it was technically LA still when he was there. In LA, it was Todd Gurley. In Seattle, it was Kenneth Walker, Chris Carson, right?
Yeah, Chris Carson, that's a name.
The offense largely went through the success of the running back. The running back is a key position. There's a reason the Bears spent money on the running back position when Shane Waldron came in this offseason. And you're seeing it. And again, there's people out there that are like, well, Swift wasn't that good. He was running behind the best offensive line in football. The dude was still a first-round draft pick. Let's not forget it. Maybe he was a high second. But nonetheless, he was still a top 40 draft pick in the NFL. There's a reason for it. He was really freaking good at Georgia. And there are those traits there. And you see it, what happens when you get him out in space. Hell, I think back to that Carolina game and that screen that he took, 45 yards. Of course, takes it down to the 1 yard line. You can't punch it in the damn end zone and get Caleb a passing touchdown, but neither here nor there. He really has dialed it up, and you've seen it. You've seen the offense take to another level. That Rams game for Swift was really the coming out party. 90 yards on the ground, 72 yards through the air. He was doing it all in that offense, and he was, over 50% of Caleb's passing yards for that game. Now you've seen it. Like you said, Q, the offense has hummed when DeAndre Swift is playing best. And I think it's a hot take, but I don't think it's as hot as you think it is, Q. I really
Right.
think you're onto something here.
Well, and some of it is I'm biased against it. When they signed him, I said, I don't like that number for DeAndre Swift. I don't like that number for the guy who ran behind a great O-line in Philly and really didn't produce outside of that. I didn't like that number. I didn't like what I saw from him the first 3 weeks. It's hard for me to turn that stone over. But I need to give the guy credit where credit's due. He has performed the last 3 games very well, and that needs to be recognized. And that needs to be all of the people like me out there who are lamenting the decision this whole time. We need to eat some crow on it because he's doing the dang thing.
He is doing the dang thing, and he looks explosive. And I'll tell you what, I really think, everybody's busted Ryan Poles' balls about this free agency class and maybe lacking that top-notch, maybe offensive lineman edition or something of that nature. But you got to give him credit where credit is due. I mean, look at where they've added Kevin Byard on the defense, which we talked about heavily on our last episode. Swift on the offensive side, and the even if it's just the explosion that he's bringing to the running back position, because you get so many people that are like, well, if you can consistently do this, of course, if you can consistently do anything in life, you're going to be really, really successful at it. That's just the nature of the beast. But human nature is you're not always consistent. But players in football, especially in a sport in football, if you are able to create those explosive plays, if you really look at it, you boil down a stat sheet in football, it's out of the 150 plays that might be run over the course of a game, maybe not even that, 90, 100 plays. It's 5, 6, 7, 8 plays maybe that really help determine the outcome. Man, you got that guy that's a home run hitter. Look at the baseball playoffs right now. Giancarlo Stanton gets paid a lot of money to strike out a shit ton in the regular season, but guess what? The Yankees are going to the World Series, and he had 4 postseason home runs, and that's a big reason why they're there. DeAndre Swift's kind of the NFL equivalent of that. He's a big home run hitter. Maybe he's not always consistent, 4 or 5 yards a carry game in and game out, but he's going to give you those difference-making plays in both the run and the pass game.
And dictate the looks that the offense gets when he's on the field. Like
100%.
It's a factor that I think gets overlooked, and I think there's first few weeks, his reading of his blocks was really, really rough. And again, got to hand it to him. He cleaned that up like crazy. Yep. Like he is almost like he flipped a switch of like, okay, well, we're not doing this anymore.
There's probably a lot too with just watching film with the coaches. And I guarantee you they're sitting in those running back meetings and saying, hey, look, DeAndre, I love how you hit this hole. But hey, man, when we get that look, make sure you creep backside just for a split second, because you might see green grass that you can take advantage of with your explosive nature. So, and I think, it's just being a veteran in the league. He understands what it takes to improve, and, you can respect that. Sometimes it's okay to pay for a position that's unconventional when the guy is going to take things in stride and improve upon it. And like you said, Q, it seems like he has.
All right. Well, I think that wraps it up for us, Ron. Do you have any final thoughts you want to throw out there before we end this thing?
I have a quick final thought, and it's also partially to help showcase Scott's comment because I think it's a fun hot take here. He says the 2024 Bears will end the season with the largest point differential in the league. They're currently 3rd in the NFL. That's probably changed, obviously, after play today, but they were 3rd in the NFL coming into Week 7 action. Obviously, being on the bye is going to skew that number ever so slightly. I think that's a fun hot take, and I hope it does happen, because if that happens, it means the Bears are probably in the playoffs. I'm just excited it's game week. I'm a little bummed that the game that was flexed for this coming week to the America's Game of the Week in the 3:00 slot is now a little dampered, because I don't know if Jaden Daniels is going to play after getting injured today. But that being said, I'm still excited to watch Bears football again, Q, and looking forward. We obviously don't have any offensive line tape to really review this week, but we will have our preview show, obviously. I'm looking forward to just Bears football returning, because it felt weird not having Bears to watch today. It really did.
It has. And to Scott's comment, I think the Bears are either 3rd or 4th now, because the Bills were at 39 and they won by 2 scores, I think. So they moved up ahead of the Bears, but the Vikings. Well, actually, so the Bears are probably fourth behind the Vikings, Lions, and Bills because the Vikings were so far ahead. Their narrow loss shouldn't have moved them down very far.
Yeah, and I think also in fairness to, I was gonna say I think in fairness because of the Packers too were still kind of up in that neighborhood and they put up 24. So I would
In
fully
point differential. Packers only won by 2.
Oh, well, sure.
But
sure.
the Commanders put up like they won by like 30. So that should have put them ahead of the Bears now.
Yeah. I'm trying to oh, here's scoring. I'm trying to find my point differential, but of course the NFL.com is not helping me here.
Right. It's probably not updated yet. Yeah, the Washington blowout was the other team that probably went ahead of them. But that's all we got for you guys. Thank you so much for listening, watching with us. We hope you enjoy the rest of Sunday Night Football, or if you're listening, we hope you enjoy the rest of your day. But Ron, why don't we? Oh, and by the way, this will be put out in article form over at ontapsportsnet.com. So make sure to check that out. It's up on YouTube and anywhere you can get podcasts, obviously. But come join us during the game week if you're new. If you're new around here, we do a game preview every week. We do a post game every week. We do an offensive line film breakdown every week where me and Ron get into the nitty gritty details of the offensive line tape. So come hang out with us. But Ron, let's get out of here the only way we know how.
Bear down, baby.
Bear down.